I gotta admit, I'm still fascinated by this concept of the friendly Newfoundlander. I think on one side of the coin, it's undeniable that there's truth to it, but I think a lot of Newfoundlanders, people that spend a lot of time in Newfoundland, I think you know that there is another side to that coin. It's getting close to the end of the year here now, and I've just been reflecting on a lot of the things that I've put in my videos, and I did create a couple of videos on this topic earlier in the year. So this is kind of a compilation of those videos here. I'm just kind of looking back on them, and I think they're worth revisiting. And my channel has grown a little bit since I first put those videos out, so hopefully I can reach even more people with them this time around and have everything all together in one, because it's both sides of the coin are represented in the stories that I told earlier. I want to start with a lot of stories from people who moved to Newfoundland from other places, and you'll find a lot of the stories that those folks are telling are generally positive, very positive, with maybe some instances where they had to think, are people actually friendly from Newfoundland or not, but generally positive. And then towards the end of the video, I hope you'll stick around for it because it's really interesting. There's an account from a Newfoundlander born and raised who has moved to the mainland, but he, in my opinion, nails the argument against friendliness, and not completely. There's always that thread of like, this is true, this is not a myth, but it's not as simple as saying, yes, Newfoundlanders are Canada's friendliest people. This Newfoundland is not necessarily the friendliest province in Canada. And even that, I mean, that's just surface level to mention that. You can really get into something if you're comparing it to other provinces, but I digress. So if you watch this and things are familiar, yes, these stories have been shared on my channel earlier in the year, but I'm purposely repackaging them into a single video for just sort of coherence and make sure that everything is together all in one place here. So I hope you'll watch through to the end. I know this is going to be a little bit of a longer video, but I hope you enjoy it, and I hope to hear from you in the comments with any thoughts you might have on it. All right, enjoy. There's a lot of stereotypes associated with Newfoundland, and in particular Newfoundlanders. There's one in particular that stands out as being like really, really good, and that is the stereotype of the friendly Newfoundlander. For the most part, you know, I have no argument with it, but there's definitely scenarios where I question it. Are Newfoundlanders friendly? And also, what does that even mean? We can be friendly, we can hold the doors for people, we can say hello to people on the street, but are we welcoming? And I think that's more important than just being polite and friendly, going through the numbers in that way. So I understand you are married to a Newfoundlander.
Yes, I am. So my first trip was in 2016, and that's also when we got engaged. And we had spent a few days in Newfoundland, like meeting family and just sort of going around like St. John's area. And my experience up until that point had been that people tend to be friendly and they say hello to each other on the street and strike up conversations here and there. So you had set it up so that your cousin was there for the proposal to document it. Don't remember all the details, but there was two of them, your cousin and his wife. So I think maybe you asked them if they could take a picture, and they did, and they were taking pictures. I think the wife had your phone, and your cousin, who I didn't know was your cousin at the time, he took out his own phone and was taking pictures. And because my experience in the few days that I've had there was that people were really friendly, at first it struck me as like, what's going on? Why is this guy taking pictures or whatever on his own phone? But it didn't weird me out very much, because it just felt like I could really justify it pretty quickly in my head that people are just really friendly here, and he's probably just gonna like send it to us or something. And it turned out that it was your cousin. But even if it was a stranger, again, based on my experience in the first few days there, it wasn't out of this world that the stranger was gonna take some photos of his own, and I just assumed he would just send it to us, and it wasn't weird.
But I think my greatest surprise was the amount of talented and very nice people that we met here. So like, people were surprisingly nice, and I'm not just saying it. Like Like everywhere you go, most people are nice. But I think people here in Newfoundland and in Canada in general, they appreciate new cultures. They appreciate different ideas. In our case, people appreciate the Brazilian influence in our music. They like to listen to Brazilian music. They are curious. And Mark, I'm not saying anything bad because nothing bad occurs to me. So it's not like I'm trying to be flattering. It's just like I really love it here.
Friendliness, like kindness, being welcoming. It's sometimes as Newfoundlanders, there's certain things that we do that we're conscious of, and we know we're like putting in an effort to be friendly, and we do something that, depending on what the situation is, could be considered something fairly big, supporting a business or, just something like that. But sometimes it's the small things that we do without even really thinking about, just something that kind of feels right in the moment. It just comes across as kind, as welcoming to, somewhat of a stranger, right?
When I came here, the day I arrived, it was pouring rain, like sheets and sheets of rain. I had never seen it rain so hard before. I remember walking out of the airport and there was a man standing there with a cab, and I asked if I could use his cab, and he said sure, and put the bags in the car, and I said, oh, I forgot to take the trolley back, and he said, oh, that's all right, buddy, I'll get that. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. Like the cab driver even knows people's names that work here, and it was so great. I thought this is a good spot. So as we were going to the hotel, we were having a great conversation. Like this man was really chatty, and I was not at all familiar with people who actually had conversations with people that they didn't know. So we were having a grand chat, and I remember going past, we went out the highway, and there was all this rock and low trees, and it was really rugged and wet and stormy and blowing, and I just thought, this is beautiful. I love this spot. So from that day, I knew, as soon as I arrived, when I took that drive, I thought, yep, this is where I'm supposed to be. After all of the places we'd lived, I knew this is where I'm supposed to be.
When I think of friendly Newfoundlanders, I think of experiences that I've had in Newfoundland. So first thing that comes to my mind is last summer. We of course had our son with us, and Mark's parents' neighbor had learned that we were visiting with our son, and one day we went out, came home, and there was a bicycle for our son to use. So that was really kind and very thoughtful of him to do that. Another example I can think of is being in Bonavista for a day trip. The weather was pouring rain, and you had gone out of the car to pump gas, and then went in the store to pay, and then came back out to the car, and you got in, and then realized that the gas cap was open. So you got out of the car, and at that same moment, another guy had gotten out of his truck, and on his way into the store, he had made a detour to come and close the gas cap for you. And he said, oh, I was gonna do that for you. And so both of you were out in the pouring rain. Those are the type of things that where people go out of their way. Might be a small gesture, but it does make an impression, because he didn't have to do that, and the weather was terrible, and I'm sure he just wanted to get out of his truck into the store and back in his truck. But he saw that he could help, and he rushed over to help.
It was definitely a cultural shock as well, because you guys speak very fast, and I was not used to the speed, but Newfoundlanders are such a warm people. I felt immediately welcomed, and it was funny because I also lived 2 years in Brandon, and the people over there, they are also so nice, such a nice people, and I love them so much. And when I told them I was coming to Newfoundland, they told me, oh yes, my dear, like, you think that we are nice, like, not a chance. Like, Newfoundland people are even way nicer. Like, you're gonna be so happy over there. And yeah, I can tell that is true. I definitely think I have way more friends in Newfoundland and obviously in Brandon, Manitoba, than I ever had in Mexico. And it's not because I didn't have friends in Mexico, but it's because Newfoundland it's just like a warm hug every single time. that I go out, I feel welcomed.
I think it's really important to remember as well that Newfoundland is a pretty big island. That's not even accounting for Labrador. I'm just talking about what I know, and I've been around Newfoundland quite a bit. And my experience is that Newfoundlanders are Newfoundlanders wherever you go. But whether you're in the city of St. John's or in one of the small communities dotting the coastline around the island or anywhere in between, people aren't all the same in Newfoundland. The Newfoundland culture is not a monolith, as you probably have heard about other cultures. So remember, if your experience is St. John's and it's a certain way, it can be completely different than Harbour Breton or Harbour Grace or Great Harbour Deep, any of these other places around Newfoundland. So don't paint your picture based on any one of these communities alone and say Newfoundlanders are friendly or Newfoundlanders aren't friendly. It's more complex than that. Getting around and seeing more of the province will certainly help paint the full picture of what Newfoundlanders are actually like.
I will tell you, I live in this country for 8 years in this city, and I think in these 8 years, just only 2 Canadians invite me to their home to get dinner or lunch with them. So if I am in a small space, probably the chance to meet more people more faster and engage with the community will be faster. Instead to a big city like St. John's that is not big, but even though it is big if you want to build community.
Only 2 people invited you to their house.
Can you believe it? Like you? And one that invited me like a few weeks ago, and I was like, well, thank you. Well, that show you, like, it's not people, I don't know. And I have strong networking, and I have many friends going there, you know, many events and things, but it's still not people that really is opening the doors of their home to you.
Yeah.
You know, that I think in rural Newfoundland, you find that. In Labrador, you find that too. Mm-hmm. And that is the beauty of rural Newfoundland.
I have been outside of St. John's, and I find like outside of St. John's that they're way more friendly outside of St. John's. Like, I remember I went somewhere around the bay and literally could not find a bathroom. Couldn't find a bathroom, met this person at the gas station, and for some reason the gas station didn't have one. So this guy was there and he was like, I live right around the corner, come to my house, you know, like a total stranger, didn't know me. That was really nice. That was something that was really memorable actually. So Newfoundlanders are definitely nice, but I find like people around the bay, they're as welcoming as people back home. It's, yeah, way more open to receiving you in a sense, publicly receiving you, if that makes sense.
It's not like we've taken it upon ourselves and like given ourselves our own nickname by calling ourselves friendly. This is something that a lot of people have kind of bestowed on us, and it's a point of pride for us. But when we think about it, we think about it kind of like something that is part of us, but it's actually something that we kind of do for the benefit of other people, right? We're friendly for the sake of other people, if we really get down to it. But what does that really mean? And what does it mean to us? Right? Is it going to mean the same thing for us as it does for the people that are the targets of our friendliness? You know, how do they take the way that we're acting when we're trying to be friendly? Cultural differences dictate that friendliness and being welcome looks different person by person. So how we act and how we perform as being friendly, how is that perceived by somebody that is receiving the friendliness? You know what I mean?
Someone said Newfoundlanders are friendly, and another person said, I don't think Newfoundlanders are friendly. And I said to the person, I used to think that, but I've come to the conclusion that it's just like love language. People express love the way they like to receive love. And Newfoundlanders are friendly the way they like to receive friendliness. But then I'm a foreigner, and permit me to use that. I'm a foreigner, I'm an international, and the way we express friendliness where I'm from is completely different from the way Newfoundlander does it. So you can see this friction already where I experience friendliness a whole different way and you experience friendliness another different way. So no matter how much I try to be friendly towards you, it will never be received as friendly because it's not your way of understanding friendliness. So for that reason, I think I have struggled understanding Newfoundlanders for a long time, but now I'm beginning to figure out that there's a bias where I'm expecting it to be done the way I've always done it. And now just, that idea, just awareness of knowing that you think you're open-minded, but you can be even better open-minded if only you allow yourself to see it from that person's direction. And it doesn't have to be right, but just understanding the person's perspective, and so you get it. Yeah, that's been the biggest shift for me in Newfoundland.
It took me a while to kind of settle in, but it took me a while to understand the nature of Newfoundlanders. So once I began to understand the nature of Newfoundlanders, it feels like home being here in Newfoundland, as well as the people are really friendly. I find like Newfoundlanders are very open people. Now, things are a bit different than people back home. I would say Bahamians are extremely friendly, extremely open, extremely polite. Like, if you walk on the street, they'll say, hey, hello, good morning, regardless if they know you or not. The culture's not exactly the same here, but I find that Newfoundlanders are very nice in their own way. Once I began to understand that, it made me feel more comfortable being here. Bahamians are just outwardly a bit more expressive. I find like if I were to walk up to a specific Newfoundlander and ask for help, most likely they will help me. But I find that, they're very much so in their space. I feel safe here. Like, I feel like they're nice, but it's just a different type of welcoming. There's almost like that slight barrier. Like I said, Newfoundlanders are nice, but it's still like hard to kind of like penetrate those tight-knit circles.
There's definitely situations or occasions where there's a misunderstanding, and somebody who's not familiar with the Newfoundland way may look at a specific situation and think like, I thought these guys were supposed to be friendly. That guy's a bit of a jerk. But sometimes it comes down to genuine misunderstanding, cultural differences, right? Especially if you're coming from another country where things are done differently. Things are different enough within Canada when you look at Newfoundland. If you're coming from a completely different culture, misunderstandings can definitely be a factor to consider. So the two things here are like understanding that. That can go a long way to making time in Newfoundland more enjoyable if this wasn't where you were born and raised type of thing. And there's a piece of really, really clear and good advice that my friend Eric shared one time. Really simple thing, but I'm just going to let him explain it here in this little snippet. Just to give you a little tip, if you are coming to Newfoundland from somewhere else, something that is so obvious that it can fly under the radar, something you can do to make yourself feel more welcome in this place.
I think that if you're coming to Canada, or in particular Newfoundland, one thing that you should try to do, if you can, is try to meet people that live here and go to places where the locals are, because often it's easy for a newcomer to feel out of place when you are in a new town, in a new country. But my experience here is that if you go out and you go where people are, and you, like in my case, being a musician, I meet people in my concerts. I go to other people's concerts and meet other musicians, but I also play soccer, for example, so I made a lot of friends playing soccer. And I know that if you go and do yoga, and if you do other things and meet other people here, you will feel much more at home. And I think that makes all the difference when you're adapting to a place. So that's my I think my main suggestion is go out and try to meet people. Don't talk only to people from your own country. Try to meet people from different countries. Try to meet people from Newfoundland. That will make your experience much, much livelier, I guess, much better.
I made a video about the friendly Newfoundlander stereotype. That video, of course, focused on people that came to Newfoundland from somewhere else and what their experience was. And to be perfectly honest, it was a pretty much positive video. It wasn't like a case of, by any means, me guiding anybody towards confirming or denying the stereotype. I just asked a few questions when I interviewed some of these people generally about other things. When the topic of how has your experience in Newfoundland been so far, most of the stuff that was said, with a couple of small sort of soft exceptions, was that the experience that everybody had was more or less positive. Newfoundlanders were friendly and welcoming, more or less, right? My experience being born and raised in Newfoundland was not exactly like that. You can tell from my channel that I love Newfoundland with all of my heart. I love it so much, but the stereotype of the friendly Newfoundlander to me just, didn't really fit holistically, I guess. In the comments for that first video, I received a comment from somebody who I always appreciate comments from this person, the Exile NF. And this one in particular, when I read it, I was like, really, like, why am I bothering writing a script for this video? I'm just going to use this comment as the basis for my video, because it really hits almost everything that I was hoping to hit with my view on the stereotype of the friendly Newfoundlander. This person actually reached out to me on his own outside of YouTube just to let me know, like, yeah, I really like your channel, and I realized who it was, and it's somebody that we crossed paths for like an extended period of time through mutual friends back at least 20 years ago when I lived in Toronto. I left Toronto 20 years ago, so it was sometime before then. It's kind of interesting how, the friendly Newfoundlander stereotype, I'm not trying to refute it here. I still believe that overall we are friendly overall people, but this person that came back into my life through the YouTube comments is somebody who was essentially a friend from a lifetime ago, right? So I'm not going to call out your name because you seem like you're a little bit of a private guy, but Exile NF, what's up, buddy? But anyway, the comment starts off with this. At the risk of people getting mad at me, I'm going to pull back the curtain a little here. Newfoundlanders are very friendly, especially to tourists. We really want you to like us and to say nice things about us and praise our island and its people. There are so many stories of locals opening up their home and giving tourists the shirt off their back, so to say. But Jimmy down the road, they've known him for 30 years. F him, he's an arsehole. Now this is a great way to start this whole thing off, because you're going to be hard pressed to find anybody who disagrees with that. Newfoundlanders are friendly, I believe that. But the act that we put on for people that are not from Newfoundland is oftentimes just an act. And the way that we know as Newfoundlanders that it's an act is that when we see the way that we treat each other, it can be very different. Now, not to say that Newfoundlanders can't be friendly to each other. Of course they can. But there's an element of friendliness that gets extended to an outsider that just will never be extended to a Newfoundlander unless that Newfoundlander is in some way able to help you with something. Now, you can argue with a lot of things that I'm going to say in this video, but which Newfoundlander who knows is going to argue with that statement? And he continues. Sometimes that kindness to tourists manifests to people wanting to move there. Everything can go well, but as a come from away, you will never be allowed to criticize the island. Hell hath no fury than a Newfoundlander scorned, and you might as well pack up and leave. Now, I am not telling you, you better not say a bad word about Newfoundland, and if you do, you better go. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what the commenter was saying. I'm sure of it. But what he's saying and what I'm agreeing with is that that's the feel. And I've seen it happen where people are run out of town. Maybe not literally, maybe they don't leave, but they're just basically ostracized because they had the nerve to say that the weather sucks in St. John's or something like that. A lot of the stuff that people say is true, not always, and some people can overstep, and the whole idea of the negative stereotypes about Newfoundland, we don't find that funny, for the most part. Some people don't care, but for the most part, that's not what this person's talking about. But if you criticize Newfoundland, even in good faith, it can be a problem, and that's when you start to realize that Newfoundlanders may be not as friendly as they seemed initially after you made the decision to move here. And this is the kicker for me. This is the part that by the time I got to this part of the message, I realized, like, this guy is in my mind. He's saying what my brain is already thinking, right? He says, Newfoundlanders aren't all that nice to each other. There's a real towny-bayman divide. Sometimes my mainlander wife witnesses firsthand, and for a slightly older generation, a Catholic-Protestant divide. As a Catholic townie, I have a very different lived experience than a Bayman Protestant. I believe that. I did mention in that other video where, like, if you have an experience in St. John's and you shape your idea about Newfoundland through St. John's, then that's valid, but that experience can be very different than if you were in Gander or Corner Brook, or even much more different again if you're in a small outport community. Whether that comes down to religion these days is probably not going to be the case, but the culture was shaped by religious differences for generations and generations, and communities were largely divided by religions. I graduated high school in either the last year or the second last year of the denominational school system in Newfoundland and Labrador, which means I went to a Catholic high school. And if you're not from Newfoundland, the idea of Catholic schools is very different than it was when I was in school. My mom has told me stuff where like the Catholics did not mix with the Protestants. There wasn't a lot of fighting or animosity on a grand scale, but people just didn't mix, right? Discrimination in those days was along religious lines. So we're talking, a generation before mine, but even in my generation, it was clear to us we were Catholic, they were Protestant, whatever denomination of Protestant they were. And that was made clear. The Bayman Townie thing was a little bit more evident. I know that in Mount Pearl thought, at least when I was a kid, Mount Pearl thought that we were like the cutting edge, the vanguard of Newfoundland. Even more so than like St. John's. St. John's thought of Mount Pearl as Shelbyville, and we were not really like friends, but we were all townies. And townies looked down on Bayman. That's just how it was. Why? We're all Newfoundlanders, and if we go to Ontario or Alberta, they don't care if we're from Mount Pearl or Harbour Breton. They're just looking at us as stupid Newfies, but we looked at each other as like subclasses within the Newfie class. So there was animosity that way. But we look at each other, I guess we're looking for ways to elevate ourselves over whoever we can. And when we're at sort of like the bottom rung of Canadian society, we look at ourselves as like, okay, I'm going to get a step up over you because I'm a townie, or vice versa. You're a townie, you don't even know how to debate a hook or whatever. You don't know how to, whatever the dismissive thing would be. Maybe I'm looking into it too far. This is what I honestly think it is. Everybody's looking for a step up on somebody, and when you're in the bottom rung of the national society, you look regionally within Newfoundland, and a townie would look down on a Bayman or vice versa for whatever reason, and the end result of that is that we're not nice to each other. Even within Mount Pearl or within whatever community you're in, you're not necessarily comparing yourself to somebody from another town. You're looking at yourself in the town that you're in and trying to elevate yourself, whatever the situation is, whatever the reason was. People in Newfoundland are not that nice to each other. Now, is that unique to Newfoundland? No, but it's particularly pronounced probably because there's a small population in general. And secondly, because there is this expectation where we're supposed to be so friendly. And I can't say this enough, I do believe that generally speaking, most of us are. But you find people that are absolute pricks. And especially when they're in Newfoundland, they guide their prickiness to other Newfoundlanders. And maybe it's the fact that the expectation is here that we're supposed to be so nice to each other, but the reality is that we're here. It hurts so much more, so it feels like we're here. I'm not a psychologist, I don't know, but I do believe there's something to that. So the comment continues, we can also be a jealous bunch, where if you become too successful, you get accused of being uppity and thinking you're better than everyone else. Man, like, this guy keeps coming with all the hits. Now there's examples, particularly I think with those singing competitions, Canadian Idol or whatever they are, now Canada Got Talent, all these competitions where Newfoundlanders get behind the people on these shows like nothing at all. Remember Sexy Rexy back in the day, can't remember his real name, Kelly Loader just recently, shows on TV, Republica Doyle. Doyle's coming out with a new show, I can't remember the name of that show, but he's going to be a cop again. But anyway, people get behind this stuff and it's great. But there's almost like a qualification that needs to be met before Newfoundlanders get behind you and push you. Because if you're doing something good on your own, but you're not considered qualified, whether that's some national stage like Canadian Idol or Canada's Got Talent, the crabs in the barrel come and bring you back down. It's a jealousy thing, it's well known, and if I'm saying anything that's wrong here, please let me know. And if it's not jealousy, it's gossip, and it's kind of the same thing. It's all meant to bring somebody down to your level. And look, man, are Newfoundlanders friendly? No, we're nosy. Nosy's a nice way to talk about gossiping. It's cutesy, right? But man, this thing can get vicious, especially when you're in a smaller town. I think this is even more noticeable when you're in a smaller community. Now, with all of that said, I'm going to close off with the final paragraph of the comment from Exile NF. And I'm not even going to put any context in it because it says exactly what I would want to say, with one exception, which I will point out. But here it goes. Having said all that, I still love the island, warts and all. It's a very interesting and beautiful place, full of quirky characters and wonderful natural beauty. I even like the weather. Nope. It just took living on the mainland for 20 plus years for me to realize it. all of it. I agree with all of it, except living on the mainland for 20 plus years myself. I think I like the weather even less than I did because I know that there's more out there, and I can never say I like the weather. But that has nothing to do with friendly Newfoundlanders. I just can't stand the wind and the cold. I'm not an outdoors winter guy. Like, no, you can keep the weather, but all that other stuff, all of the problems that we have, all of the individual problems that we have with people not being friendly, I don't really care because I still love the place so much. But at the end of the day, are Newfoundlanders friendly? You decide for yourself. I just put 2 videos together, probably talked for about a half an hour between me and all of the interviewees that I met with. This place is not perfect, but it's lovely. And if you expect rainbows and gumdrops or whatever the expression is, sometimes that's the way it is here, but not always. Keep your eyes open. You can't trust everybody. There are jerks out there. There are people going to try to rip you off, even in Newfoundland. Yes, it's true, but I love the place so much. And, you know, it's not for everybody, but if it's for you and you know it. So if you didn't completely hate the video, click that thumbs up button down below, or maybe even consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it, and it really helps the channel. So